Our session is Glitter of the Silver Screen. Please take your seats and please switch off your mobile phones or put them on silent mode. The participants of this session are Meenu, Gaur, Mazhar, Zaidi, and Mehr, Jaffri. This session is being moderated by Mr. Jaffri. The total duration of the session is 60 minutes. We would appreciate it if complete silence is observed while the session is in progress. A question and answer session will be held at the end. You have to raise your hands and the microphone will be brought to you. And please keep your questions short and precise and refrain from making a statement. Our moderator is Mr. Javed Jabbar. You all know Mr. Javed Jabbar.
Thank you, thank you.
Should I continue?
I don't know myself, but thank you for telling me that the others know me. Oh my God, that's very dangerous. But thank you.
Mr. Javed Jabbar's activities concern writing, filmmaking, voluntary services, advertising, communications, environmental studies, politics, and public affairs. Have you left out anything?
Yes, ask my wife, she's next door, and she'll let you know. Thank you, dear. Thank you. That's enough. Thanks a lot. Thank you.
No, I'll just continue. As a minister of 3 federal governments and as a senator, he has played a major role in enhancing freedom of the media in Pakistan. He drafted the laws which introduced private electronic media to Pakistan and also the Freedom of Information Ordinance. In addition to 13 anthologies and monographs of his writing, his most recent book is Pakistan, Unique Origins, Unique Destiny, published in 2011, with versions in English, Urdu, and Sindhi, and in India as Pakistan, Identity and Destiny. So over to you, Mr. Javed.
Thank you, dear. Thank you very much for your gracious introduction. Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim. It's a pleasure to be here, even though I make a very poor substitute for Navid Shahzad, who's a very dear friend, befogged at the moment in Lahore due to very clearly an American conspiracy against Pakistan. And despite these terrible conspiracies, Pakistan will persevere. So here I get a chance to be in the company of all you charming people who are kind enough to come into the hall after this jam-packed gathering in the previous session, but this is also going to be very, very, I'm sure, well attended. I see many committed and keen and distinguished personalities here. And I'm privileged to share this rostrum with 3 persons. My God, beginning with the Zinda Bhag team, the person Meenu Gaur on the extreme right, and then accompanied by Mazhar Zaidi, who was also very substantially responsible for producing a very, very distinctive kind of Pakistani cinema film. And then Mehr, Jaffri, who has, mashallah, done so well with Seedlings, which is a film that has achieved international distinction, and is also associated with a certain play which all of you should be seeing this evening. If you haven't seen it, 6 characters in search of an author. And, oh, sorry? Have you seen it? None of you have seen her play? This is terrible. Please leave the hall immediately. Those who have not seen the play are not eligible to be part of this. No, it's a very fine performance of a very unusual and difficult play. But I think that interaction between cinema and theatre and the subject, Glitter of the Silver Screen. What a nice but a very misleading title. It's a glitter, yes. It's no longer silver. It's multicolored. It's multidimensional. There's nothing to replace or take the place of cinema, the magic of the cinema. Where you go into a hall, darken the lights, and you share an experience with people who you don't know, from Adam or Eve, and whether it's the Chiana Walas as they used to be when I was slightly younger than what I am now, or the 5 rupees wala or the 10 rupees wala. For 2 hours, you immerse yourself in a collective experience, and you transcend so many social and economic and cultural divisions and boundaries, and share in this dream which neither this new monster called social media, neither television, that even worse monster, can ever take the place of. There's nothing like the cinema. So, the cinema. Now, how do we go about addressing this very, very difficult subject? Difficult and at the same time challenging. I just want to flag 6 points before I invite the valued comments of our brave panelists to my right. The first, I think, is the origination of content for cinema. Does all good cinema originate from literature? Does it have to have the sanctity of literature, of poetry, of legends? And how much of cinema, good cinema, can be original, divorced, if that is not too strong a word, divorced from literature, rejecting the traditions of literature and seeking out a new path? So, the origination of content for cinema, I think, would be the first issue. The second is the need for pluralism in cinema. Not just one kind of cinema, song and dance, or action, or romance, or comedy, or grim films, but all kinds of films to reflect the beautiful variety and range of humanity, wherever it exists, and not just one kind of cinema. And the third facet would be the incredibly collaborative dimension of cinema. A poet can sit in a corner of a room with just one page and a pen or a pencil and create magic. And more power to poets and writers, and a painter too, a solo act of creativity. But cinema is called the 7th art, the ultimate in collaborative creativity. Even though the writer, the director, and sometimes the poor producer like myself, recently reincarnated as a producer, we have to bear the brunt of arranging the genesis of a cinema. No film can be created single-handedly. And it is incredible how to coordinate the personalities, the diversities of talent and attitudes and behavior, and make it come into a coherent whole at the end. So that's the third. The fourth would be, how do you go about ensuring that this masterpiece you've created, because every film, according to its makers, are masterpieces, for whichever category they belong, how do they get to be seen? How do they get to be distributed? How do they get to be exhibited? And distribution is a facet different from exhibition, because distribution may not necessarily lead to maximal exhibition. You may be restricted to 1 or 2 theaters, or only to DVD distribution, as has happened with even Western films. Slumdog Millionaire originally was not even going to be distributed. Every distributor they had approached had rejected it. And the head of Fox Searchlight happened to see this film, and he said, no, this film deserves theatrical distribution. And that one man and that one decision transformed Slumdog Millionaire from a forgotten, ignored film into a worldwide hit. So, distribution, exhibition. And then public reaction. Public reaction. कि जी जो चीज पॉपुलर है, मकबूल है, जी बॉक्स ऑफिस हिट हो गई जी. So if it is a box office hit, it's a great film. If it is not a box office hit, it's a miserable failure. La hawla wala quwwat. I mean, some of the finest films made in the world, leave alone Pakistan, have never ever been box office hits. They haven't even got distribution. There are great directors in Europe who have never been allowed by the exclusivist, monopolistic control of the US film distribution system to get their films shown on US screens, except maybe 1, 2 art theaters in downtown New York. So the world gets excluded from public perception of what is good cinema. 99% probably of Pakistanis never get to see the excellence of Iranian cinema. Never get to see it. PTV won't show it. And no private channel will show it. No cinema owner will risk showing an Iranian film. Iran is today producing some of the best films in global cinema. So, what is public reaction? Is it the box office? Is it what critics write about cinema? I mean, while one loves good quotes and good criticism, anything good said about a film is marvelous, but I'm sorry to say, critics alone are not the only evaluators of what good cinema is. Because to be a good critic, you need to be a respectful student of cinema. You have to understand the effort it takes to create 1 second of good cinema. And most critics, because they are conditioned to be critical, I'm sorry to say, disregard the enormous effort that people invest into creating 90 minutes of magic. And that doesn't mean I'm trying to ignore or bypass mediocrity. Mediocrity or bad quality should always be criticized. But I'm just letting off steam. And on its own, regardless, and I conclude the last point which you have to suffer from me, is ये कहते हैं कि जी मीडिया में नहीं है जी आप जब तक आप नजर ना आए मीडिया में तो आपकी क्या हकीकत है. And my response is, जंगल में जब मोर नाचता है तो क्या मोर की खूबसूरती कम हो जाएगी अगर नेक्स्ट डे अखबारों में उसकी सुर्खियां नहीं आएंगी, अगर टीवी चैनल उसको रिपोर्ट नहीं करेंगे. So does beauty depend on how the media report beauty and truth, or do not truth and beauty have a validity of their own regardless of what the critics or the media say? So good cinema is worth creating regardless, if you can afford it, like fools like me can afford to lose a few millions, and I'm still trying to recover some of those millions. And if the 5th Karachi Literature Festival, hello dear, hello, are you offering me a fat fee for moderating this discussion so that I can recover my investment in various films? You are not. I didn't see her here. Hello. Thank you. May I start now with the courageous lady who decided to develop this film, Zindabad, Meenu, Gaur. Yeah.
Well, I'm wondering where to start, and well, I guess a good place to start would be to talk about why and how we set about making Zindabad as a film. How did that happen? What were we driven by, etc. You know, Farjad Nabi, who's my co-director, co-writer for Zindabad, and myself, we were making a film on, a documentary film on the Pakistani film industry. It was just, you know, because so much of the archive of the Pakistani film industry is now disappearing or has disappeared. So, and there's very little written about it. So we just, you know, we just set out to talk to artists who had kind of changed their day jobs because the industry had collapsed, etc. And somewhere, I think, while visiting those studios and seeing this sort of sheer destitution, you know, that is there in those studios, I mean, we used to really come back very depressed. There's something really sad about a very big, big studio, which obviously has seen grander days, you know, lying in that sorry state. So then we decided, we were already working on the script of Zindabad, and we sort of decided that, you know, this entire film must be some sort of a tribute to the industry. And what we did in the film is kind of incorporated it in the visual form of storytelling. So that's why it's a film with so many, flashbacks and certain kind of usage of songs within the narrative. Even the poster is hand-painted by the last living poster artist of the Lahore film industry, S. Iqbal. So really, Zinda Bhag was a tribute to the industry that no longer exists, and all those artists who made those films and the heydays of the industries in the 70s and 80s. That was driving us. And I think the other thing that was driving us is that we wanted to tell a story that was a very everyday story from Pakistan, because as filmmakers, Mazhar, Farjad, myself, we were very, very, very sick of the kind of stereotypes that one gets to see when one imagines Lahore. That was particularly close to us, how we represent Lahore, but also Pakistan. So we really wanted to stay away from those sort of grand meta-narratives and geopolitics of, terrorism, and also stay away from, the kind of Bollywood exoticization of Lahore, because one of the pet peeves of Mazhar when he watches a film like Veer Zara or something is, which Lahore is this, And I've never seen it because nobody speaks Punjabi, and everybody it's some kind of a romantic imagination, and that Lahore is also not out there. So we wanted to tell a story which was very Lahori, and everything that we loved about the city and loved about its humor, the jugat, everything we wanted should be part of the film. And that's how Zinda Bhag really happened, and I just feel that it would be quite exciting, given that now people are talking about something changing with 2013 being a bumper crop year of films, of Pakistani films. I would be excited to see more stories which are everyday stories of Pakistan, because I think we've seen so much about Pakistan, represented by others, and sometimes we also start replicating those stereotypes, because you've seen it so much. So it would be nice to sort of break that and try to tell stories in which we ourselves are embedded. So yeah, that's what was driving us behind Zinda Bhag.
How nice. Thank you. Thank you very much. And you are in partnership with Mazhar, part of a very courageous, I think, trio who set out to do something very innovative and different. Mazhar, how do you look at this experience that you had, and if at all you wish to comment on any aspect of the 6 facets one has presented? But please go ahead and share your personal views first.
Yeah. No, I think I can share some of my experiences as a producer of the film, and some of the points that you raised about distribution and all of that. So obviously, producing a film in Pakistan where industry, as Meenu just described, the basic infrastructure of the industry is already completely collapsed. And since 2006, when the exhibition of Indian films became legal, the cinemas started coming again, and we have a lot of multiplexes coming. Almost every month we are getting at least 3-4 screens added. So I think that way it is changing. But when we started Zinda Bhag, obviously it was a big challenge to produce the film here. To start with, the biggest challenge I think was less money but more human resources, because over the years, because the industry has collapsed, we don't have trained film people. For example, there is no facility to do sound. There is no sound equipment is not available to start with. There is no post-production facility. So, but what we did was a very good experiment, which turned out to be very good, was that we actually went to a couple of film schools in Lahore, BNU and NCA, and got quite a lot of fresh graduates and some of the students who were still studying at that time. And we talked to their head of departments, and that's how we put together a crew. And they were trained in a way that after Zinda Bhag, the same crew has actually done 3 films, because they've gone through the entire process. Excellent. We deployed all the latest technology, like, using a software to make schedules and all the other stuff. So I thought that was a big challenge. And then secondly, when you talk about the distribution, yes, that is also a bit problematic, but gradually it is releasing. It is becoming easier now. And I mean, of late we had this, controversy of the local producers talking about, getting some preference in exhibition. So I thought that that was a very good development, the solution that the exhibitors and the local producers came up with, because there are a lot of such, regulations in countries like Malaysia and Iran, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, in Turkey also, that local films get some kind of preference just for a couple of weeks at least. Like every cinema would have to exhibit the local films for 2 weeks. Right. If it is good enough, it can survive for the third week, fourth week. So at least they get some preferential treatment. So I think that way it is growing up, but I would say that it will take at least 2 more years before we get enough screens for the films to become viable commercially. Right now, we have in total about 60 odd screens. We used to have about 735 in the 70s. Now we have about 60, 62. Out of those 62, the operational screens are essentially 40. So it's a very tiny, digital. Yeah. And if you want to have a comparison, in Delhi area alone, there are 307 screens. And so the economy of scale and commercial viability. But hopefully the way things are going, in a couple of years, Pakistan would have at least 150 screens.
Hopefully.
So I think then it will be a very different story altogether.
Very good. Thank you very much for sharing that experience, and we'll come back to you. And Mehr, completely from a indigenous perspective, unlike the excellent example of a non-propagandistic or non-partisan collaboration between alien Indians and un-alien Pakistanis, but very friendly Indians. Here we have an example of a film called Seedlings, which did so well and which you initiated. What has been your experience of this process, and how do you look at the future in regard to the challenges?
I think, just hearing Meenu and Mazhar talk about the genesis of their projects, with Seedlings, it began with myself and the writer of Seedlings, Summer Nix, and then the director, Mansoor Mujahid. We were working on another project then, on a project called Kolachi, which was a completely different genre. It was a science fiction film. He had written it. We had shot a concept trailer of it to show to prospective investors and would-be sponsors. And it was something that, I mean, I had learned from, let's say, my background in business, that, we would like to have a sort of proof of concept before we go out shopping for money for it. But we knew at the time that film as an investment vehicle was completely unknown to people over here, or businessmen or sponsors or things like that. It was kind of unheard of then. But we just set out to do it because we were like, this is what we want to do and we have to do it. And that ended up getting some traction once it went online, once it got released on YouTube. It got a lot of traction, and especially from players abroad. So right now there's people in India and Australia who are considering that film. We found that we were kind of shot down by everyone in Pakistan, and it was kind of a necessary lesson to learn, because again, like I said, we were at the beginning of, kind of the cinema being seen as a viable option for, like I said, for sponsors to attach themselves to, or investors to, kind of make money out of. And so with the kind of, let's say, momentum that we got from Kolachi, the concept trailer, and suddenly our work was known to people, even though it was just a trailer. It was known to actors. So Amna and Mohib, they had seen it. It was known to other, people in film schools and stuff. So people started coming to us and they wanted to work with us. And we had decided that we would go for our next project in a much lower budget film, so we could just go ahead and do it, because we were tired of sitting around and twiddling our thumbs and waiting for months and months and months for, legalities and things to come to fruition. So we decided to go ahead with Seedlings, and you'll find that usually in your first project, it's only your family and your friends and yourself who will invest in you. So that's how it is. And but it was good, because we were afforded the amazing opportunity to work with Amna, Mohib, other fantastic actors, Usman Riaz, who did the musical composition of the film, because of kind of the momentum we had built with Kolachi and the kind of goodwill we had, made with that we were just wanted to do something, and we were not going to stop because we weren't finding, we were finding, we were hitting brick walls everywhere we went. But I find the interesting thing in Pakistan is that maybe it's because it's the early stages, but people are kind of waiting to see what's going to happen before they jump on the bandwagon. So it happened with Seedlings also, that we kind of heard all no's until we went to New York, and then, you know, all these awards started coming in.
Right.
And then a couple of other projects also that we were working on, they were kind of like, you know, waiting around to see. But that's fine. I guess it's the beginning
Right.
of the life cycle of the cinema industry. But like Meenu or Mazhar were saying that in the beginning of any such industry, do we need some sort of protectionism to propel the industry forward? And I know at your time with Ramchand, there were hardly any cinemas then.
Yes.
Now there are cinemas, but the question is now, are you going to only make commercial? And commercial is not a bad or a dirty word. It's great. Cinema is great entertainment.
Yeah.
It costs a lot of money to make. It costs a lot of money to exhibit.
Quite.
But will you only be making films that those distributors and cinema exhibitors like to show? Because where does that leave all the artistic stuff that the businessmen don't really see eye to eye with? So that's when maybe state funding and things like that come, you know. Myself having been a producer for film and also theater, and now an actor for theater also, I'm finding myself moving back to theater because things like NAPA, the National Academy of Performing Arts, it is state funded. It's allowing artists to actually tell stories, and that might not be able to be commercially viable across the street at Arts Council, where it's much more expensive.
Absolutely.
But we have to find. So what I'm very interested right now in Pakistan is finding alternate screening spaces.
Yeah.
It's very expensive to go theatrical, and it's not only that. There's so much competition in Bollywood and Hollywood films, and there's such few screens.
Absolutely.
Like Mazhar was saying, the economics don't make sense right now.
Quite right.
So with Seedlings, there's so many people who still haven't seen it. Now I've started to have screenings in alternate screening venues.
Very
So we just had one at the Bow screening room. You know, places like artist communes and stuff like that.
Right.
If you go to New York, there's so many films that are being made, and not that many cinemas to support all of those films. People find whatever bars, cafes, and stuff to do it. So that's, I think, for artsy types of films is we should explore finding venues, alternate venues.
Thank you. Those three comments have been very interesting and illuminating, and I think two facets of what can be done at a state level before we go back to what artists in cinema can do and entrepreneurs are highlighted. One, the need for Pakistan in particular to look at a model that has been very effectively used in Europe and the United Kingdom, whereby a percentage, a small percentage of cinema tickets sold, every cinema ticket sold, automatically goes into a film fund, a film financing fund. And there are countries where, because television is a major consumer of cinema, television channels are also mandated to contribute to the film finance fund because they have a ravenous appetite for these songs and dances and other kinds of material. Now that would enable the state to play a positive role with reasonable guarantees so that only partisans, ya chahitas don't get the benefit of that film finance fund. If you have credible people like, for example, myself on the board, we would ensure that the distribution is done only to people like Mehreen Jabbar and so on, and no one else. But given checks and balances, the state can play a very critical role in stimulating the production of new kinds of films at very low cost. In fact, at no cost to the public exchequer, to the state exchequer. People themselves who go to the cinema contribute a fraction. That's one. And the second is an Indo-Pakistan question, because Meenu is here. And we are now currently on the threshold of expanding Pakistan-India trade. Should we not introduce into this discussion the need for reciprocity by cinemas in both countries, that they give a minimal percentage of their time for the screening of films from the other country? Now, that's a big step because in Pakistan, poor Pakistani films don't have any protection from Bollywood. Even if there is a good quality Pakistani film, if there is a Bollywood song and dance masala film, that good Pakistani film will be turned away from the cinema and Bollywood will reign. Now, there is something very unfair about this, and vice versa. And that would help promote greater knowledge and understanding in both countries about the cinemas of both societies and about societies that exist in both countries. So, Meenu, do you see the scope for this kind of initiative or initiatives to be taken in India or bilaterally?
Well, absolutely, and I'm sort of glad that you've come to this question from the side that you have, because very often this entire question is posed very differently, and that is from the side of banning foreign films in Pakistan, which apart from probably sort of gaining being a sort of more political point that people are trying to make, is not a viable point. If you have any exhibitor here or if you have any filmmakers here, that's not exactly what they want, because the entire multiplex what happened with the multiplexes in Pakistan and Pakistani films starting to be made had a lot to do with films coming from other countries like India and Hollywood, and audiences returning to the cinemas. So obviously, I don't think any one of us as filmmakers in Pakistan would argue for banning, because that would mean, again, these audiences will leave the cinemas. So I'm glad that you've come to it from the other side, which is that there has to be an initiative by which there is some reciprocity of content. So if we are watching Indian films here, and if people are accessing Indian dramas, that is exactly what should be happening on the other side, and that is where something like the state needs to step in. And because that's, nobody's going to listen to me, if I tell them I think there should be reciprocity, So I think the state needs to step in and do something about it, because I think it's really, it's also impoverishing the sort of audiences of India if they are not getting to see Bangladeshi films, if they're not getting to see Pakistani films, if they're not getting to see Sri Lankan films. And all the languages spoken in each one of these South Asian countries are spoken in India. So actually, there is a ready-made audience, like ours is a Punjabi film, and we are going to be releasing in India in April, and we are very excited because we want to see what the response of the film will be in Indian Punjab, because stories do transcend. I think one of the countries where our films can translate seamlessly are South Asian countries. So absolutely, I think that needs to be argued for. And given that now Indian films are, I'm sure that the Pakistani market has become a seriously viable market for Indian films. Mazhar will probably give you the statistics, but I don't know where the Pakistani market comes in the number, but I think it would be the 6th, 7th largest market for Bollywood films, right? So it's a fairly large market. So I think it would make even trade sense, for them, that if that reciprocity is, is available, then somehow the air out of this debate about banning each other's films and products, also will disappear, I think. So yes, absolutely, and I think some initiative needs to be taken in this direction.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think, I also agree. I would just like to add that yes, Pakistan has now, after the last film Dhoom 3, Pakistan has become 5th or 6th largest market for India. So obviously it has become very important for them that the content is exhibited here. And as Meenu said, and you also suggested, that some mechanism should be there, that Pakistani content is also going to be shown there. And as Meenu also told you that Zinda Bhag is going to be released in April. So I think that kind of initiative will also send a very good signal that a Pakistani film is also exhibited there. Before Zinda Bhag, I think Khuda Ke Liye and Bol were also the two other films which were released.
And Ramchand.
And Ramchand Pakistani, 3 films were released. So I think that kind of initiative will add a lot of strength. And in terms of the stories and the content, I would say that if Pakistani filmmakers, the upcoming filmmakers, if they're making stories which are local, but they have some kind of a global approach, I think that is one way to fight this, the economy of scale. Because, as Mehr was also suggesting, that if we are just making films for Pakistani market, it's not going to be viable, not at least for another 4 years. But if you're making a film which can be exhibited in other markets, like UAE, Canada, America, UK, or India especially. India is a huge market, and Pakistani filmmakers should take full advantage of that. They should make films which are local stories, however they have a global treatment, so that they can be exhibited. So we are having this experience that Zinda Bhag is being exhibited pretty much everywhere. In US also, in Canada we'll be releasing soon. UK, we're releasing on iTunes. So I think that is something that the Pakistani filmmakers should really look into, that there is a big market next to us.
Yeah.
We should really tap into it.
Thank you. Mazhar, before I request Mehr also for a response, I just want to say that while it is necessary, films cost money, unlike writing a poem or making a painting. The moment you begin to adjust content for the sake of the potential audience, do we make, and I'm not making a definitive statement, I'm just posing the question, do we begin to make a fatal compromise? Because the sanctity of original intent in creativity is compromised at the outset if you say that this content which I am going to produce should be acceptable in country XYZ and should not reflect whatever originality or purity that I want to communicate or we want to communicate. It's a dilemma, there's no easy answers. But I wonder whether one should compromise and whether one could persevere with purely individual creativity, even at the risk of being arrogant and not caring a fig for what the audience in country XYZ thinks or says, but just produce it and let the world discover the excellence 50 years from now or 100 years from now. There are no easy answers. No, because it costs money and who's going to pay for it? So, Mehr, please, would you comment on this
Just
or
about,
any other aspect?
Well, actually, yeah, I had many questions when Mazhar was also saying, to make a film that not only appeals to Pakistanis but internationally, because the economy of scales don't make sense. But your story was a very, very localized story,
Very local,
and this topic was very specific to the certain area in Punjab or Lahore. But then you mentioned after that a global treatment. So I
Yes,
wonder,
exactly.
what does that mean exactly?
I mean, yes, exactly. I agree that, one should be very true to what one is making, and as Javed was saying, all of that. But what I mean is that, tell a local story, but if you're telling it in a way, the treatment is global, that somebody from Europe can also at least watch it, So that will only make it possible for you to create more films like that.
Absolutely.
So it's not an issue of making a compromise on your content. It is just making a treatment. Obviously the story, as you said, the Zindabad is an extremely local story. It's a very specific Lahore-based story. However, people are watching it and relating to it, and I keep quoting this lady that I met in Canada. Arshad is sitting here, who organized the festival and invited us, and she came after the screening. She's from Bulgaria.
Okay.
And she came to me and said, the boys in your film are the boys that I went to school with.
Oh.
And she's from Bulgaria. So, she could relate to it, because I guess Bulgaria is in East Europe and there is a lot of immigration issues there also. So what I mean to say is that, people can relate to that kind of story.
Yeah.
Quite right.
That's true. And actually,
Yes,
one
please.
more. Sorry, I'm
Go
playing
ahead.
moderator over here.
No, please,
But
go ahead.
one
Go
more
ahead.
question I had is that when you guys are talking about this initiative to then,
Yeah.
cross-export films, what does that practically mean? Because is that on a sort of like a policy or a public level? In your case, you guys probably got picked up by distributors, so that was just a commercial,
Yeah, I
If
mean,
there was no-
right now there's nothing that aids this, right? So we went and struggled like all indie filmmakers would struggle in India, trying to get their film released. And actually, we went to the Goa Film Bazaar, which, as I'm sure people here know, is a film market. And that's where we had a couple of, industrial screenings for distributors, and our film got picked up.
Yeah.
It might not have, the chances are equal. But given, I meant that at an official level, if there was something that was aiding Pakistani filmmakers, because it's not so easy to pick up your bags and, go knocking at the doors of distributors, arrange screenings or whatever. But if there was a certain policy by which it was agreed by the two states, like, this is also a business and it's trade. So, if there was an agreement, I'm sure it would really help Pakistani filmmakers.
So to make the access easier.
And also the Goa Film Bazaar that Meenu is talking about, that is also actually a state initiative.
Yeah.
That's
It
done
is.
by NFD.
National Development Film Corporation.
So the state initiatives like these do help indie filmmakers like us.
Absolutely.
So it does. So I think state should be involved at some
Bilkul.
level.
And before we open up for questions from the floor and comments, just want to say that, you know, part of benevolent protectionism, not a coercive or discriminatory protectionism of the state, there can be benevolent protectionism. And for example, the state should make obligatory that for every concentration of population of, say, 1 million people, there should be 5 cinema screens. By every large housing estate, of which there is so much advertising in Pakistan, as much as a playground is necessary, a library should also be compulsory. A cinema should be a compulsory part of any new housing estate. Because even though there are multiplexes emerging, they are only concentrated in some parts of the city. Say, take Karachi. There are no multiplexes in Banaras colony, mashallah, another quasi-stronghold of the Taliban, or Sorab Goat. Maybe they would benefit if we had multiplexes in Sorab Goat and they got to see Zinda Bhag and, of course, films like Ramchand Pakistani. I'd love to see the Taliban reaction to Ramchand Pakistani. But what I'm saying is that there should be a state policy that makes it compulsory for the construction of cinema theaters, not only in Pakistan, but also in India, which do not depend entirely on commercial revenue. And that is where you need visionary state policies in favor of the cinema. So now, can we request wisdom from the floor and insights and comments? And right at the back, we have a hand, and do we have a microphone? We do have a microphone. So that gentleman, that very suspicious gentleman standing right at the back, yes. And then we'll move forward. Thank you. Yes, and do identify yourself. If you don't want your identity to be known, you can take someone else's name and then pretend to be someone else. Yeah? Oh, you've got most. Go ahead. Pretend to be him. Go ahead, please.
मेरा नाम मोहसिन सईद है and जिंदा भाग I watched जिंदा भाग I watched Seedling लम्हे बहुत अच्छी फिल्म्स थी and there's a revival of Pakistani cinema, the new wave of Pakistani cinema now, not 10 साल से हम सुन रहे हैं मगर अब हो रहा है. But what bothers me is that soon government will hand over Pakistan to the Taliban, that we will be ruled by Sharia, imposed Sharia. What kind of films will you make then? Sharia compliant films, or will you leave the country and make nostalgic films like Iranians are doing? Soon it will happen. So,
well, Mohsin, can I just say something? The kind of struggle it was to make Zinda Bhag, or I'm sure Seedlings, I don't think you should make things so dismal and difficult for us already. We've only made our first film.
Yeah. And we want to make our second film.
We want to make...
Absolutely. There's hope. There's hope. Yeah, there's hope. There's that gentleman, and then we come to you. Yeah. बोलिए.
मेरा नाम इमरान शेरवानी है और मैंने मोहसिन को इसलिए बोलने दिया कि जावेद साहब ने कहा था कि सस्पिशियस लुकिंग जेंटलमैन, वो भी उतना ही है. हम दोनों एक ही कबीले के लोग हैं. एक चीज़ जो जावेद साहब ने कही, मैं इसमें थोड़ा सा ऐड करना चाहूँगा. हम बहुत बात करते हैं कि फिल्म इंडस्ट्री को सपोर्ट करने की ज़रूरत है, मिलनी चाहिए किसी किस्म की नॉट फॉर प्रॉफिट एक्टिविटी के तौर पे. सिनेमा इंडस्ट्री को भी इतनी ही ज़रूरत है. हमारे पास वो सिनेमा हाउसेज नहीं हैं जो प्रॉफिट मोटिव से ना चलते हों. हमें ऐसे सिनेमा हाउसेज की तरफ सोचना चाहिए. सिनेमा इंडस्ट्री नहीं बनेगी अगर जो सीरियसली फिल्म इंडस्ट्री को सपोर्ट करे, तो हमारी अच्छी अच्छी फिल्में नहीं देखी जा सकती, नहीं दिखाई जाएंगी. हमें उस पर भी बात करनी चाहिए. और वो ज़रूरी नहीं कि सिर्फ गवर्नमेंट की तरफ से हो, वो प्राइवेट सेक्टर में भी नॉट फॉर प्रॉफिट काम होता है. कुछ दोस्तों को सोचना पड़ेगा संजीदगी से कि वो नॉट फॉर प्रॉफिट सिनेमा हाउसेज के लाइसेंसेस लें और उनको बनाएं और चलाएं.
सही. थैंक यू. यस, योरसेल्फ. Microphone up here, please. Yes, and we'll go there eventually. A microphone. One microphone for this huge audience. So unfair. And I'm still listed as Navid Shahzad. ये बड़ी ज़्यादती है. Navid Shahzad के साथ बड़ी ज़्यादती है. मेरे साथ तो नहीं. जी.
Hi, my name is Arshad Khan, and as Mazhar mentioned, I run a film festival. I run a film festival in Canada. South Asian Film Festival, and I just with all due respect, wanted to correct something that you mentioned about the film Slumdog Millionaire and Fox Searchlight picking it up for distribution. Actually, this film went to several film festivals, Slumdog Millionaire, and it won, at the Toronto International Film Festival, it won the People's Choice Award. And that's what actually got Fox Searchlight to look at it again, because they had rejected it initially. So that's actually the story. Now, having said that, even the Taliban need filmmakers. So I'm trying to grow my beard. Not just that, there's always going to be room for cinema, and there will always be, we all together need to make a space for expression.
Yeah.
I just wanted to ask Mazhar and Meenu a question, if I may.
Please do.
I just want to ask them how they feel about the fact that this film, and it's a mystery to a lot of people, how a film like War can get can break box office, and why Zinda Bhag, which I have talked to people and asked them, and they're like, we want to see it, we haven't seen it, where it's playing, why it didn't play long enough and all that. Can you address why this film didn't do as well? Because it did really well in Canada and in the States as well. So please, thank you.
Thank you. About that matter, young man, I just want to say that I'm aware that it won awards. I'm only saying that it was that one chief executive of Fox Searchlight who overturned his own colleagues who felt that this film won't do well. So I acknowledge that, absolutely. The film was appreciated for its quality. Incidentally, Danny Boyle, who directed it, his previous film had cost about $47 million and recovered only $4 million. So they lost $43 million. So he didn't have very good credentials. So most distributors were saying this director's film will not work. But then, you know, that's the magic of the cinema. So, Mazhar, please.
You know, I think there's sort of larger questions right now, really. I mean, I think in every industry there are different kinds of films that get made. Even in Bombay right now, you know, you will have films that are blockbusters, you know, in terms of, let's say, something like Dabang or whatever. And a smaller film like Ship of Theseus or something, you know, it just is not able to break even if it has a very big production house like Amir Khan Productions behind it, you know. So the thing is that, but I think the thing to focus on is that with every different and new film, a new audience is created, you know, and that audience comes back for a similar film like that. And so what I'm trying to say is that I think Zinda Bhag had its own audience, you know, which is not the same audience as for a film like War, and that is how it should be. And with, I think, in the future, the audience which came to the cinema to see Zinda Bhag will want to see more cinema like that. So I think it's good to see like just very different kinds of films. I think it's scary when you start getting the same kind of film that is being made again and again. And I think, like I'm saying, there are bigger questions. I think, you know, what Mohsen was really trying to talk about is that there is a general sort of a popular, I don't know if it is there, but, you know, a sense that there's a delegitimization of cinema, you know. And even in the course of this documentary that we were doing on the film industry, actually that's what we heard from all the artists. I don't think it was about the fact that they made cinema sort of a illegitimate sort of a entity, you know, and allowed it to get criminalized, allowed all kind of elements to sort of take it over. And so I think that's, so what I think what Mohsen is saying is also important, that is there a public perception that believes, wants the growth of cinema in the country, and then only will the state sort of step in and take any you know, serious measures to rectify what's happening with cinema in the country.
Yeah.
Yes,
Can
please.
I?
Yes, yes. Oh, there's a partisan element here. There's some relationship with someone on stage.
I am a passionate cinema goer and a passionate revivalist of Pakistani,
Please go ahead.
everything Pakistani.
Please,
because I've lived abroad for 19 years.
Please
I've
identify yourself for the benefit.
I am Kul Jaffri. and
Jaffri, did you
Pakistani.
say?
Kul Jaffri.
Yes, please notice the surname.
And
Jaffri. Yes, go ahead.
And
please.
I tried to publicize Ramchand Pakistani as much as I could before
Yeah.
it got released in India.
Really.
Not tried.
In the
you
Far
did.
East, in Singapore particularly.
Thank you.
And since 5 years we've been trying to bring it,
as a Pakistani film festival. I was in conversation with Balaji Films in Singapore for 6 years because the word Pakistani does not exist. So my 3 questions are, I was away when Kara was happening in Pakistan. Most of it, I have not been first hand with it. Was that one of the best platforms? Is it still not, to revive an international film festival? Because how we got to see Russian and other cinema back in the 70s and all was film festivals from those particular countries.
Yeah.
So if we revived our own film festival and made our own
Right.
award-winning films,
That would
Ramchand
help.
Pakistani a couple of years ago and Seedlings to
4,
me
5
is a
years
pioneer revivalist film which is winning Best Actress Award in Washington, Best
Sahi.
South Asian Film Award with Indian entry in Washington DC
Sahi.
as a best film. So that's like there is content minus the low budgeting of it. There is pretty universal content. Those
Sahi.
stories are understood. So is that
Thank you.
a
Yes.
serious thing to think about?
Yes.
Our own film festival,
Thank you.
where
Thank
all
you.
the cinema would be
Good,
seen.
Jaffri. Absolutely. Yes.
What's happened to Kara?
What's happened to Kara? Yeah, absolutely. I think one should remind Hassan Zaidi and Mehr Jabbar and others. They had logistical difficulties, but we can revive that. And just for the record, I want to do a commercial for Ramchand Pakistani. We won the International Film Critics Prize at the New Delhi International Film Festival. And that was 6 years ago. And I'm so glad that Seedlings has now won other awards, and Zinda Bhag was nominated by Pakistan for the Academy Awards. Marvelous science. And I just want to request, Mehr, if you have thoughts to add to that before we go to this gentleman who was wanting to ask a question. Do you have anything to add to what a certain person related to you had to say?
Well, actually, about the Kara Film Festival, I think it's a really important initiative. And I remember speaking to Hassan Zaidi, and I'm sure you were also involved in it.
Right.
And you would have more to shed light on than I would. But again, it comes down to sponsors and money and
Yeah.
financing and things like that.
Can
So
be done.
until I guess us as an audience really have that push that they just can't say no anymore, then we won't, it'll come back then hopefully.
Film festivals would make a major difference.
And there's a film festival happening next week. Actually, part of the Sin International part of the Sin Festival is a Sin International Film
Yeah.
Festival.
There is
So
a-
if there's anybody who wants to see Seedlings, it's playing on Monday at Newplex at 9 p.m.
Yes. And without a documentary on Bilawal Bhutto. There's no Yeah, sorry. Yes, please.
Yep.
Yes.
I've got a slightly technical question for Meenu and Mehr, if that's all right.
Do identify yourself. Thank you.
My name's Altamash. I run a business and a fiction writing workshop. But yeah, it's about flashbacks and why you both decided to use flashbacks in your film. And particularly for Zinda Bhag, how did you decide where to end the story? Because some people said, I want to see him go abroad and, mess up or succeed. So how did you decide to end it on that ominous note?
Mehr, you want to, should I take
Well,
the
he had a
question?
very specific question.
Okay,
By the way,
alright,
I
alright.
love the ending of Zinda Bhag, so I want to hear this one.
Well, with flashbacks, as I just said a while back, that, we were trying to do use a very particular kind of visual form, which was prevalent in the 70s and 80s. So it's not just the flashbacks. You'll see the transitions how the ripple dissolves, and, the color tones are really veering towards, yellow, everything, which is all reminiscent of a certain era of Pakistani cinema. So the flashbacks were part of that. But also, as you know, that the character, there's this character of a storyteller, and the storyteller is actually just sort of telling you, is giving you like street wisdom, about rags to riches, riches to rags stories. So, because it involved other characters which were not part of the main narrative, of course we had to show what went on with those stories. So there was what I'm trying to say was there was the narrative need, but then there was the whole idea about using a certain form. Your second question was about the end. Okay. There are various ways to reach the end of a film, right? One is you write your way to it, and one is that you know the end of your story and then you write backwards. We sort of wrote our way to it, to the end. And it was because simply for me, there was no other end possible for that film. And we had a lot of producer I was going to say producer types till I realized Mazhar and Mehr are both sitting here as producer. But we had, a lot of sort of producer distributor types, okay, who used to tell us कि देखिए ये end सही नहीं है क्योंकि इसके बाद फिर लोग जाके ना खाना नहीं खा पाएंगे in restaurants. So, like they were so obsessed with the idea that people should leave a cinema not thinking about the film. Whatever happens, people should not leave the cinema thinking about your film, because that's like just not conducive to their evening out. So, yeah, I mean, I know that those are real issues for, I think, commercial cinema that,
and I think the fact that this end actually leaves people a bit disturbed is actually kind of a strength of the film, that they walk out with even though there is a lot of humor in the film and all that, but when they walk out, they're forced to think a little bit about it.
It comes down to the human relationship at the end and kind of friendship and loyalty. Or
I
whatever,
like the ending very much. Yes, dear. And Durya, after this. Oh, you already have the mic. Sorry, she stood up before you. Yes, Durya Bibi. Do introduce yourself in case one or two don't know you.
My name is Durya, and I'm at Karachi University. And my question is about training of art students, film students. And many institutions have now started film schools. And you also mentioned, Mazhar, that in the end you had to turn to the film schools to get someone with some technical training. Obviously, it's not of the quality that it could be. But when the students, and they're all making very nice films, what happens to them after they've made the films? Do you have any advice on that, on what they can do after that and not get absorbed into just the channels or wedding videos or advertising films?
Well, I mean,
what should the next step be?
I think the next step, obviously, in our case, I thought our was more informal kind of experiment, but it worked out very well because all the people that we got from BNU and NCA, all the students, they are doing very well after that, and they have been part of 2 or 3 different films. But I think ideally what you are saying, it will only happen if there are films being made constantly, which is happening actually. There are right now at least 10 films in production, right? So that way I would say that if this system is formalized, that producers can actually get in touch with the universities and film school departments and maybe make it more formal, it will definitely work, because the kind of experience that these students who are all 23, 24 years old, they got on our shoot was invaluable, because this will be an ideal thing for a film student to get from the school straight go into a set. So I think this needs to be formalized.
Our art department, was completely made up of students who had not even finished, with NCA. And I think at least in a couple of places where Zindabad picked up, certain awards, they were particularly mentioned, the art department and how good, how good they were. And they really were. And I think what happens is that because it's sort of people, they lack, we all lacked experience. It was our first feature film too, not just theirs. And I think that sort of there's another kind of drive and passion that sort of comes into the set by that kind of energy. But I guess also just to add to what Mazhar is saying, that when all of us sitting here can actually, and including the students or everybody else who is on these film sets, can actually make a living out of making films, I think that's when we can say there's been a revival or whatever. Right now, most of us don't make a living out of making films. We have to do other things, So,
and also add to that it's also just a natural course of things that when we were starting out with Kolachi and then Seedlings, by and large the people that we went to were people who were just, they wanted to live and breathe this work. So whether it was actors at Napa or whether it was people at film school who had before that only been doing work in commercial stuff or television. And then that's also necessary because that's the bread and butter and stuff. So even now, if I'm acting for Napa, let's say it's not the the most well-funded institution also. So a lot of people say go to television, you'll get more exposure and things like that. So that there'll be a good balance between both. But I'd say organically, if you want to find people, the artists who are really willing to put the work in, including ourselves, I guess, because it was for everybody a first in terms of films. You will go to the people who are the most enthusiastic and passionate, and they usually are the people who are, artists and filmmakers or students of film or students of art at schools. So
irresistible to, yeah, please go ahead.
Hey, Mehr, I wanted to know about your writing.
Identity, please.
Oh, my name is Amber.
National identity card number also. Yeah, please go ahead.
My name is Amber. I wanted to know about your writing process because it's so beautifully written and it's so poetic at the same time and it's raw at the same time.
Nazdeek, हाँ.
Sorry. Can you hear me? Mehr, I wanted to know about your writing process, आपका writing का process, because it's so beautifully written and it's poetic and it's raw at the same time, very fresh. So what's your inspiration? How do you go about it? Is there a process that you follow? Sorry, Meenu.
No, it's all right. I think Mehr is a much nicer name than Meenu. Well, our writing process was, okay, so we had this we had this idea about wanting to do a story, about Lahore and, these boys who want to get out doing the donkey. We had this idea for a very long time. Mazhar, as a journalist, had covered a story about this ship in Greece, which had capsized. And all these really young Pakistani boys, they died. And there were Indians and, Indian boys from Indian Punjab and everything. And Mazhar, recounted to us his visit to the village when the bodies came home, And everybody was on the rooftops and everything. And it was just, even right now as I speak, it was quite something to hear that story. And then we had really close friends, really like people who were related to us and close friends who had successfully done this journey, who did the donkey, became successful. People who didn't become successful, continue to live abroad with very alienated lives, Then we had close buddies, who had done it, their brothers who had done it. So we were very sort of closely, these stories were something, and they used to sort of tell us these anecdotes which are in the film. Most of them are true, even about the horse racing, or the ones that the Pehelwan character narrates. They are fairly true anecdotes, fictionalized a little. So we just realized that this is a parallel universe, with its own idea of masculinity, its own idea of honor, wisdom, etc. So we knew we wanted to make this film. So we were always sort of penning some ideas down. And then when it had to happen, it happened very suddenly. We became part of a project which was a South Asia film project.